Welcome to Seminole Sidelines. Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're having a great week. It's been a really good week for the Florida State football coaching staff, hosting camps and prospects. We are talking about 2 5-star visitors on the Florida State campus. That's a big deal to begin with, no matter how these commitments end up, because it just shows you a little bit about how far Florida State football recruiting has come under Mike Norvell. Yet another we like to kind of reflect on the climb.
Hey, what's up?
And I think in part we've also reeled in Charles Fishbein here for a few moments. All right.
Busy man,
Charles Fishbein. It's kind of like Adam Schefter on ESPN. We might have a balm at some point, a fish balm at some point during a live Seminole Sidelines, but we welcome.
You never know when a source calls.
Yes, you never know. It could be a Power 5 coach. It could be a high school coach. You never know. But kind of a good little insight into Fish's business and cell phone minutes there. Okay, welcome to Curt Weiler. Welcome to Charles Fishbein. I'm Bob Ferrante. Again, we're here every Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'll see you on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. We're going to jump right into it. When you have 2 5-star visitors, there's nowhere else but to go from there. Let's first reflect on Jeremiah Smith. He was the first guy on campus Monday, left on Tuesday. Curt, you had a chance to do that story. I think put the story in its proper perspective. He is an Ohio State commitment. He left an Ohio State commitment, but very curious about Florida State.
I'm very curious about a lot of places. I mean, for a guy who everywhere he goes and pretty consistently talks about how committed he is to Ohio State, he visits a lot of places. He's definitely he's not keeping his options open. I thought he gave a very thoughtful answer. I thought, kind of speaking to it, kind of like it came up towards the end of the interview with him. And he's a guy who everybody wants. I think Rivals has him as the number 2 overall prospect, the number 1 receiver in that 2024 class. It's been locked in with Ohio State since the end of last year. And everyone's kind of like, why do you, if you've been locked in, if you keep saying you're locked in, why do you go see other places? And I think he kind of was just like, things change. Like, I mean, he didn't say it in as many words, but what if Ohio State wide receiver coach Brian Hartline gets a head coach job, and he's been trending towards one. I mean, he's established himself as one of the better recruiting assistants in the country. So there's a world where that happens. There's also a world where Jeremiah stays goes to Ohio State, but maybe he doesn't want to stay there and considers that second recruitment the transfer recruitment. And he just kind of said, things change. I want to keep learning about other people so that if the situation changes, I have kind of all my facts. I thought it was a very thoughtful and candid answer from him. And I mean, a lot he liked about his Florida State visit, whether it made him, he like you say, he arrived in Ohio State commit, he left Ohio State commit. It didn't change anything. You might be playing the long game a bit, but I think it sounds like he's going to be back for an official visit the weekend of the Miami game. And I mean, who knows where Brian Hartline is by then or in the weeks after that. And that, could be something where he's already used a lot of official visits at the other places he's really considering. So Florida State keeping that open, it could play in their favor in a world where things break that way.
A lot of aspects to recruiting have held true. It's about winning. It's about relationships. And look, Keon Coleman, Florida State was not right for Keon Coleman in 2021. It was right for Keon in 2023. You are playing the long game with the relationship business. Fish, you posted, I think, some very smart comments on the message board about Jeremiah, but your thoughts on just how this recruitment, could unfold here.
Yeah, you're right. I think they, one, you recruit these kids not only for now, but with the transfer portal, you're recruiting them. Like you said, the long game, you never know. He doesn't play as a freshman. All of a sudden he's upset. He wants to get, start. Things that were promised to him weren't delivered. You just never know with these kids now. Also, I always take into account, you never know what happens. You don't ever want a situation where something happens with a family member or anything, but all of a sudden somebody in the family gets ill or whatever. Now the kid doesn't want to go that far from home, or the parents don't want the kid too far from home, and you've recruited them. It gives you a chance now to not be you're in the ball game. You've recruited him. The kid liked what you had to say. So I've always said you until signing day, I believe you recruit these kids till the end, or they stop taking your call and you just can't get into contact with anymore, because recruiting could change from now to January or February, and you just don't want to be out of the mix. If you're in the mix, I've seen it so many times where you see a kid, Jalen Ramsey was a kid FSU was never in on, but they hired Jeremy Pruitt. All of a sudden they landed him, and then you had DeMarcus Walker, who he was recruiting. Florida State was recruiting him, but he had committed to Alabama, and then you just never know. One of these coaches or a contact or a friend or somebody could end up on FSU staff. So you always want to recruit these kids all the way to the end, because you just never know. Jeremiah Smith's a difference maker. We've talked about it. There's not many of these guys that could come into a program and take you from 10 to 12 wins. But if you could get these guys that can take you from 10 to 12, all of a sudden you're playing for playoffs and national championships, when before you were good. You're a 9-10 win team. It's nice, but all of a sudden these type of guys are those guys that put you over the top. That's why he and KJ Bolden are so important, because those are the ones that get you over the top.
Another more recent example, true. I mean, like you mentioned with Jalen, Zaire Thomas is someone who kind of the Florida State staff just kind of stayed in contact with, and when a lot of the places he was considering had coaching changes, as can often happen, guys got fired or guys left, whatever, he fell right into their lap, where it was a place that made the most sense because it was a stable place amongst the lack of stability elsewhere. So, I mean, yeah, this staff seems to be very good about, playing the long game and being aware of, just because someone's committed or just because we're not trending towards maybe landing them doesn't mean things can change. Things change fast in the college football world.
And it's worked out for them, right? I mean, they continued to remain in contact with Landon Thomas, for example, when he was committed to Georgia, and then he made that flip back to Florida State. I think it's good until the coaching staff hears the words, "I'm locked in, stop texting, stop calling."
Yeah. Or they stop responding. Yeah,
exactly. You just continue to check in. So let's move on to KJ Bolden. Again, the 5-star safety from Buford, Georgia. He is not committed. He is making visits, gathering intel for what he wants to do with his decision, saying to Curt and some of the other writers at the Moore Athletic Center today that Florida State is in a top 5. There's not a full flushed out top 5, but KJ Bolden, very, very intrigued by Florida State. Curt, your thoughts overall on KJ in the interview there?
Yeah, he's a guy who, and it's a phrase that's thrown around sometimes, he pretty candidly called Florida State his dream school. I think he has been hoping to kind of see the success on the field that would make him consider Florida State. And I think, he talked about this was an unofficial visit as well, where Florida State has kind of saved the official visit for a later date. Sounds like it might be the Miami weekend for him too. But he talked about, think they're supposed to be good this year. Maybe I think the words were try and bring us home a natty. And I think, if Florida State is as good as we think they can be this fall, I think that will make a difference for him, because you look at who he's considering. He's taken official visits to Ohio State and Georgia, the hometown team being Georgia. He's taking one to Bama this weekend. He clearly wants to play for a contender. So he seems like a case where maybe even more than Jeremiah Smith, you need to show it on the field this fall if you want to be in contention for him. He said he is pondering he might commit like late July, August, but whether he does or not, and whether that's Florida State or not, it sounds like he wants to be back for an official visit here along with Auburn in the in season. So, it's another case where maybe Florida State's not the initial landing spot, but maybe the recruitment's not entirely over.
And Florida State is doing really well in defensive back recruiting. They've already got some prospects lined up for 2024. We'll see. Some of these guys are listed as athletes, and they could end up at DB, for example. So we don't exactly know how the full room will end up. But KJ Bolden is a truly a big fish if Florida State can reel him in.
Yeah, you're looking at a Derwin James. I think Carlos Williams was one of those guys too, even though he ended up at running back. Those guys are 5-star kids like KJ. You saw the impact that Derwin had. It makes the other guy's job next to him a lot easier when you're that good. And I've always said, I know this kid took FSU out of his top 5 at one point, but I've always said follow the visits. he continues to step back on Florida State's campus. I think that means something. They're in the ball game with them. That's all you can ask. And once again, this is a long game you're playing, whether it's basically he's waiting to see what happens. I've said this is a very important year. Florida State's gone all in. They've got a lot of experience on this football team. I have a friend that does like breakdowns of all the teams in the state and also the ACC. And they as far as like minutes and snaps used, Florida State's like one of the highest teams returning. So this is a big year for them on the field. They've got to get to that 10-win season again. Even if they get to 10 wins and they don't make the playoffs or they don't get to a championship game this year, if they get to 10 wins, these are the type of kids that you can sell on the point. Listen, we're not getting there until you come. So we need you to get us over the top. And if these kids continue to see consistent success on the field, a 10-win season again, followed up by the prior season going 10 wins, this kid KJ Bolden may sit there and go, you know what? I like Florida State. I like this Tallahassee. I like the players on that team. I feel confident enough in my ability that I'm the one that's going to get us over the top. And that's what happened back before 2013. A lot of those guys, I remember dealing with the Jeff Lucks and the LaMarcus Joyners. They were confident. They believed so much in that coaching staff and what they were doing at that time. They just needed to see progress. They saw it, and those guys felt, hey, we're the guys that are going to get this team to that next level. And most of those kids were. They were the ones that were the difference makers and why Florida State not only played for a national title, but won one. I think this is the same thing. You're seeing it with these guys, KJ Bolden, Charles Lester, all of these guys. They are the difference makers. I know the fans can sit there and go, well, we could develop 3 stars. Listen, they will only get you so far as a program. And you saw with TCU. TCU is very well coached, had very good players. But you know what? They played Georgia, and it didn't matter the coaching. The players won that football game at the end of the day. Ohio State's there. Michigan's right on that fringe. There's only a handful of teams that can play for national titles and win them. Florida State wants to go from where they're at to that next level. These are the guys they have to land. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. It's not like you can't miss on these guys and then go and be upset when they go 10-2 and they don't play for a national title. These are the guys that are going to get them there, and they are needed more than anybody can realize.
It's not going to be easy to beat out Georgia here. Obviously, Georgia, he says Florida State's the dream school, and that might just speak to, he was probably coming to as a football fan in a lot of ways, paying more attention around that 2013, 2014 run. That probably plays a role. That's something that Florida State can sell the other in-state schools not as much in terms of recent success. But, yeah, I think Georgia's going to be hard to beat. That's about an hour from him in Athens, about an hour from him in Buford. I know today news came out that Georgia's quarterback commit, Dylan Raiola, is moving from California to Buford High School to play with KJ Bolden. I'm sure it's going to be in his ear all fall about joining up with him in Athens. But, what Florida State can sell that maybe Georgia can't is, Akeem Dent's moving on after this season. There's a spot where, KJ could maybe be a day one starter. I think he's potentially that type of talent for sure.
Yeah, listen, Georgia's been great, all right, but before they became the Georgia they are now, they were in the same position FSU was in. Even though those local kids, schools were coming in, taking their top players. You saw with Deion Grant and Casey Coleman and Jamal Lewis back in the day when they went to Tennessee. Georgia's as great as they are. They can't keep holding on to these guys forever. Eventually, somebody's going to break through and crack that bowl. And this is one of those kids. Florida State hasn't had a lot of success at Buford High School. I think the only one they got was a undersized D tackle they had a few years ago that I don't even know if Georgia even recruited. But they're going to have to. You saw with Landon Thomas. They did not back down. The kid was committed to FSU. He committed to Georgia. They continue to bring him on campus. Until you put your rod in the water, you ain't going to catch these type of fish. You got to keep pounding and pounding away. And I think the one way to break through is you can't go into Georgia and go, all right, we're going to go head-to-head with Georgia for 10 recruits. You got to select the guys you really want and show that one kid more interest. Like Georgia can't – they have their hands in all these bowls to go after all these players. Listen, just show that one kid enough interest. And these kids have egos. They want to be loved and shown attention. And if FSU shows one iota more attention than, Georgia, this kid's like, you know what, that's where I want to go. And the history shows Florida State's had great safeties going all the way back in the days with some of the great safeties they had with Butler and those guys. And then you go and you look at all the way with, Derwin and the guys they've had since. This kid could come in and be the next great safety of Florida State. They have a story to sell. And you know what? Like I said, this kid, every time you think they're out of it, he's back on campus at Florida State. So there's something there. And I'm not going to overlook that. I'm not saying they're going to land him, but I do think in this situation, they have a better chance than maybe someone like a Jeremiah Smith, who Ohio State, like, let's be honest right now, they're on a roll with wide receivers. It's like, it doesn't matter who they put on the field. The next guy's better than the next one. So with this kid, KJ, he plays safety. Like you said, they have a knee with Akeem Dent. I think they have a very good shot. If they continue if this kid's coming back for an official visit in October, I like Florida State's chances at least to be in that final 2 or 3 in the discussion for his services once he decides to make a choice.
That Miami visit weekend, I think it's the weekend of November 11th, is going to be absolutely insane because it's like far and away the best home game on the schedule. FSU's home slate isn't great this year. So, I mean, it feels like everyone you talk to, you're like, you're coming back this season? And they're like, oh, yeah, either for an official or an unofficial, depending on what year they are for that. It feels like there are going to be, like there are a lot of eggs in this official visit weekend coming up this weekend. There are going to be a lot of eggs in that Miami basket. A result in that game is important for Florida State for quite a few reasons.
So we've got a lot of positive storylines here. And I think, again, Mike Norvell does not have to sell a vision. Florida State has shown it on the field, what they did in 2022, what they've done on the recruiting trail. When prospects are recruiting prospects, I should say commits are recruiting prospects, that's always a good thing too. Well, I want to go a little bit out of order in our kind of rundown. I want Fish to address the offensive line recruiting. And then Curt, you and I will go back to Michael Boganowski and some of the other prospects. But Fish, an offensive lineman, Jason Zandamela, he is committed to Southern Cal. Hey, quite frankly, Florida State has not done well recruiting offensive line yet out of this class of 2024 yet. Still a lot of time to go. Fish, you had a really good post on the Osceola's recruiting board about some options that still remain in play. Just let's kind of take a trip down here of maybe a few guys that Florida State has missed on, but also what are some of the options out there for the Seminoles?
Yeah, I don't think they have a major need at offensive guard. I've already posted all the guys that they got coming back. They had a class 2 seasons ago, which was heavily, loaded with the offensive linemen and guys with a lot of upside. There weren't any really reaches. I kind of wished they kept the Antavius Woody kid because I really felt like that would have been a kid that's very similar to Zandamela. I thought he was even a better prospect. Could have been a great guard. For some reason, they moved him to D tackle, and he felt was a position of need. But when you look at the early kids, Charlton, some of these other guys, Julian Armella, they have a lot of options inside, and they're young guys. They're not in a major need for guards. That's why you did not see them throw out a ton of offers for offensive guards. Now, a kid like Jonathan Daniels, who's 6'2 3/4, that's what he measured in at the Under Armour Combine. I know he's got long length, and he's got length as an offensive tackle, and they're recruiting him as a tackle. Really, the only 2 guys we've seen is Isaiah Wynn, who went to University of Georgia. Someone like that you could compare to is like fringe 6'3". And then you go back, the last guy Florida State had like this was Rodney Hudson, but Rodney Hudson eventually moved to where his natural position was center guard. And I think that's the same thing with Daniels. Daniels can start out at tackle, but if they have a miss in Zandamela, they could always take Daniels, who I thought of the 2 was going to be the one that eventually did not end up in the class. Now you take him, he takes that guard spot, that guard center spot. He's probably a more athletic guy, not as big and as physical and as developed, but Daniels now takes that spot. Now you just have to focus on the tackle spot where they've thrown out a lot more offers. I think they're going to end up filling those needs. As long as Coach Atkins is there and Coach Norvell's there. I'm not going to worry about the O-line recruiting anymore. These guys have shown that they have a plan. Do I have concerns for other positions? Sure. But this is one position I'm not worried about at all. I don't think the fans should worry until these guys prove us wrong. They turned around the worst room on the team relatively quickly. They've always had a plan. They've thrown numbers at this. There's going to be other guys there's going to be guys that are going to enter the portal. My stance on that, but there's always going to be one or two guys that they're going to pull from the portal on the O-line. So I'm not really concerned with Jason Zandamela going to USC. He's not an All-American right now. He's not this can't-miss prospect. He's a good player, but that was going to come in and have to redshirt, or he wasn't going to play as a freshman. And you've already seen they really don't play these young kids a whole lot. So it's going to take time. This kid could go to USC, do his thing. You know what? God bless him. I don't really think they have to worry along the O-line.
Okay, well, some good thoughts there. Just want to put offensive line recruiting in perspective. Obviously, a lot of time left here, 5+ months going up to the early signing period of December. Well, Fish, I know we told you we'd keep you here short. Curt and I will wrap up talking about Michael Boganowski, some recruiting notes, and then I think Fish will be joining us Friday for our big official visit weekend show that we'll have again 12:30 here on the Osceolas YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter channels. Fish, thanks for jumping on, and we'll see you soon, buddy.
Thanks, man. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye. All right. So, Curt, again, you were busy down at Moore this morning, Wednesday morning. A 4-star linebacker, Michael Boganowski from Kansas. He's made a lot of visits near his home, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma. This was a big one for him coming to Florida State. Your thoughts on Michael?
Yeah, I mean, he's a versatile type kid. Rivals has him as an athlete, but clearly Florida State, he talked a lot about Randy Shannon. He talked about spending time with Kalen DeLoach. Clearly Florida State sees him as a linebacker instead of a safety, like I think some other schools too. It's interesting. I mean, you look at the official visits he's taken, and this was an unofficial. It leaves open, like we've talked about, the chance for a return in the fall for an official. But it's a lot of schools around him. I mean, for a kid in Kansas, he's been to Kansas, he's been to Kansas State, he's been to Oklahoma. Those are kind of a lot of it. This feels like a bit of a anomaly in terms of geographically where he stopped in. But I mean, he's a guy who, I mean, you've talked about Florida State's linebacker board, and I think he's a guy who has emerged as maybe some other options have faded or changed. Just, I mean, recruiting boards are constantly changing like that. But no, he definitely came away impressed. He got to talk to Kalen DeLoach. I thought it was interesting. He talked about Randy Shannon. Kind of part of their time together was looking at film and kind of like pointing his film and saying, here's where I think you're a good fit in this defense, showing him some film of FSU linebackers and saying, I think this guy does things similar to what you do, kind of the cross comparison in that way. This was, I mean, coming away, this was his first visit to FSU, but it sounds like he quite possibly could come back before making a decision sometime in the fall, and it might maybe for an official visit, maybe add him to the Miami weekend. Who knows?
Right. Who knows? It's another recruitment definitely worth watching, especially Florida State has some needs at linebacker with that depth chart changing going into the 2024 season. So some items to watch there. So some quick recruiting notes here as we kind of wrap up recruiting discussion here on Wednesday's show. The Wednesday camps, the big man and the 7-on-7 competition rained out. We had a lot of rain here Wednesday morning. Just wasn't able to go. Again, the indoor practice facility is kind of in disarray because of the construction. So not able to use that IPF for anything right now, but the IPF should be good to go for August for the preseason camp for the football team. Again, look forward to Friday's show. 12:30, we'll have a preview in full. Patrick Burnham, Charles Fishbein, taking a look at a lot of these visitors. This is the last big recruiting weekend because it's the last one on the calendar. Literally Sunday night at midnight at 11:59, whatever you want to call it. We go into a recruiting dead period. All schools, everything's kind of shut down. Coaches get to take some downtime with their families. Sports writers don't have to cover recruiting day to day as much. So we might be looking forward to some downtime ourselves throughout parts of July. Although we will say we have some stories planned for you, so look forward to those coming up.
But
But
before that, I mean, they got 15 kids on campus this weekend. We got to get through one crazy one before we get there, Bob.
It's going to be an all-out weekend. We've got a lot of big plans for coverage this weekend. But I want to also hit on, Curt, Pat, and I, we've done some looking ahead at Florida State football for 2023 for the fall. We've written about position groups. We've hit on defensive ends, defensive tackles, quarterbacks, and running backs. And we hit on defensive ends a little bit last week in one of our shows. But I thought instead of just going through every name and every position group, go ahead and check out those stories on theosceola.com. We've got all the position groups, taking a look at those different factors, just what we think about various players. But let's just go, Curt, say on a 1 to 10 scale, and we'll start with quarterbacks. If 10 is the highest, 1 is the lowest of any of these groups too. How do you feel about quarterbacks and why?
Ooh, if you're asking me to rank them, that's tough because they're probably all like 1 out of 10. They're probably all, I would say, a 7 or above, maybe even like an 8 or above. Quarterback may be the lowest just because you have a great first option. I like what they have behind Jordan, but I think the drop-off would be the most precipitous at quarterback from Jordan to Tate Rodemaker or AJ Duffy. That being said, I mean, as I wrote in my preview, I think the unit's as deep as it's been in the better part of a decade. I mean, you can make the case since like the Jameis Winston days on campus. I'm gonna put defensive tackle in the middle. I'm gonna put running backs at the top because there are main questions about the defensive tackle room. I think it's incredibly deep. I think it has the chance to be one of the better defensive tackle units in the country. The caveat being, we don't know about the Darrell Jackson waiver yet. We haven't heard. The longer you don't hear about that, he could still get a waiver. Jordan Travis got his waiver in August in 2019. It can happen way late. But as of now, we don't know if Florida State's going to have Darrell Jackson. We haven't seen Braden Fisk play football yet. We saw him run in the spring. He looks the part, but it's just wanting to see exactly what they have in him. And I mean, just if you lose Darrell Jackson, the depth definitely does take a hit. It's better than it was last year. It's more fit to kind of handle that. But running back, I just think you have, more capable players than reps to go around. I mean, when you bring back Trey Benson, that was huge. You lose Trayshawn Ward, obviously, but, you bring back Lawrence Toafili. I think Rodney Hill's going to kind of step into that Trayshawn role. I think he's, very likely going to be the third head of the three-headed monster. Keziah Holmes, the Penn State transfer, who was a walk-on last year, kind of scout team player, I think is a guy who I could easily see breaking in. He has ability. Even a freshman like a Sam Singleton or a walk-on like a CJ Campbell. The depth there is just impressive what they've assembled at that unit.
Yeah, I think we've written about 4 position groups that all had, I won't say surprise return, but a welcome return by a key piece, from Jared Verse to Jordan Travis, Trey Benson, and Fabian Lovett. I think I'm most optimistic about defensive tackle, just top to bottom. It feels like one of the best in the conference. As you said, if Darrell Jackson is in play, if he does get that waiver, then, hey, it feels like that's a 9, maybe even just south of a Georgia. If a Georgia defensive front is a 10, you might feel like you've got up there with maybe one of the best defensive line rooms in the country, and especially defensive tackle. I'm kind of with you at running back. Always hate to see Trayshawn Ward move on, but in part, you feel great about Trey Benson's second half of 2022. You feel great about what Lawrence Toafili can do with limited touches as a rusher, as a receiver. Who can forget that that catch and run up at Clemson, for example, in 2021. So you've got some real capabilities there. Rodney Hill has been a practice stud consistently since he stepped on campus. And yeah, still curious, Keziah Holmes, Sam Singleton, CJ Campbell looks very nice too. So you feel great about that group. I'm kind of with you on quarterbacks. I'm very curious to see who comes out as the number 2 quarterback this August. Is it Tate Rodemaker, who I think is maybe playing, I don't want to do a comparison to Sean McGuire, but he's almost a good guy to have on the roster who's ultra competitive, doesn't really want to leave Florida State, is very happy where he is, feels very comfortable in his role. And I think Tate is a guy who you feel better and better about him stepping into game situations because of what he did against Louisville. For me with Tate, I want to see it consistently on the practice field, not just one day here and there, but every single day. Or else then it's going to be a Brock Glenn or an AJ Duffy who's going to kind of jump into those opportunities. So good storylines there for us to watch in August with preseason camp. Well, we'll have more of these preseason position preview stories coming. Thursday will be wide receivers. Saturday will be linebackers. And you know that we assign Jerry Cutts the linebackers because that's how Jerry rolls. He's Mr. Linebacker. And we have to have him. I think he wrote about 2,000 words. So if you're looking forward to some in-depth analysis of those guys, Jerry's got you set for Saturday with the linebackers. So for Charles Fishbein, Curt Weiler, hope you enjoyed the recruiting discussion and a little bit of early look at the 2023 position groups. Again, Friday, 12:30 on the Osceolas, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Help us grow. Like and subscribe on our YouTube channel. We're over 1,600. We appreciate all of you who have jumped on. If you are not, if you're just kind of checking us out, please subscribe so you get those alerts and can watch us down the road. Spotify, Apple, if you like to listen as you're out running errands, going to the gym, whatever you're doing, and just share the good word that we might be spreading about our coverage of Florida State football, recruiting, and we'll also get into some other sports like basketball and baseball this summer here too. So again, for Fish, for Curt, I'm Bob Ferrante. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk to you on Friday.